Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for attending this session. We've had a wonderful response to this session. My name is Jean Parker, and I'm the online program coordinator for the Desert Rose Baha'i Institute, and I welcome everyone. And now I want to introduce Anne Perry, who is going to share the history of Write Life. Anne is a published author, artist, and filmmaker who lives near Dallas, Texas. Joining her is Joyce Latoff, who is an award-winning writer and storyteller from Chicago. She's currently working as the writer and editor of U.S. Baha'i News. And without further ado, I turn it over to Anne and Joyce.
Thank you, Jean. It's very exciting to have an online program coordinator for Desert Rose. And it's amazing to work with you, Jean, and thank you so much for all the efforts that you're going to. So I want to share something about the Desert Rose writing retreats and also pay homage to Marlene Mackey, who co-founded and co-facilitated the retreats with me, and also to Janie Toth, who served as the co-facilitator last year. So for 3 years, we've had splendid weeks of writing, critiquing, and communing with nature and with ourselves in the extraordinary matrix of Desert Rose. There we established a close connection among local writers and those who traveled to be there with us and benefited from this very trusting connection. Now the pandemic has caused us to think differently, and so to create an online writers group and this presentation series, which we hope will replicate the retreats somewhat. And I'm so pleased to be collaborating now with Joyce Litoff, who came to our last retreat and offers so much to this forum. There's nothing quite like being in a place where you can focus entirely on writing and on your writing goals. To give you a sense of the retreats, we'd like to share a short video from a PowerPoint I made with images from the retreats. And after that, we'll hear from Joyce.
Within me, oh my home, through the spirit of power, confirm thou me in thy cause. Oh my, oh my, oh my, oh my best beloved, oh my. Oh my, oh my, oh my, oh my God. Ooh, created me a pure heart. Oh my, oh my, oh my, oh my, oh my God. best beloved, oh my, oh my, oh my, oh my, my best beloved, oh my, to me, oh my, oh my, oh my best beloved, oh my, oh my, oh my, oh my, oh my God. Ooh, created me a pure heart.
Joyce.
So I was at Desert Rose in February, and it seems like a lifetime ago, thanks to COVID. And I wrote some of my thoughts about my experience there, and I'm going to share those with you. So for me, going to Desert Rose for the Write Life retreat was both an adventure and a gift to myself. I had never been to Desert Rose, and I knew next to nothing about it, but a whole week in the desert, when I didn't need to do anything but focus on my writing, sounded like heaven. I wasn't working on any particular personal project at the time, so I actually went without an agenda. It was a whole week, basically just to allow the inspiration to come. What an indulgence to have that time. And being surrounded by this group of creative, supportive people really was just such a bonus. As a result of that week, I realized that I was spending too much time reading and not enough time writing. So I quit one of my 2 book groups and I joined a writer's group instead. It was a group where I could find the inspiration and the accountability that writing with other people brings. And being at Desert Rose taught me that. And I do hope that you also find the connection through this and can see it as a gift for yourself. For me, giving myself time for personal writing is always a gift. So much writing advice says, write first thing in the morning. But I think that those writing coaches must not realize that other sources are also telling us, pray first thing in the morning, exercise first thing, practice Spanish first thing. I'm sure all of you, like me, my morning can last far beyond noon. But you do have to write every day. And you have to put this in your calendar. It doesn't just happen. And writing emails doesn't count. You can't fool yourself into thinking that you're writing. So, all of those good ideas that you get while you're mowing the lawn or stirring the chili or showering, you need to make space and time to capture, to solidify, and to expand on those good ideas. And whenever you're doing this kind of writing, it is good writing. We often don't do the things that we want to do, and then we feel bad about it. Fear, guilt, and shame get in the way from us giving ourselves the time to do what our hearts are calling us to do. So I encourage you to let go of any of those bad feelings and then get to the other side. Your writing can take you places that you haven't yet discovered. Giving yourself the gift of time to write will make you feel good. I guarantee it. You will feel good. And I wish you all the joy those good feelings bring.
Thank you, Joyce. That's quite a testimony. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about our series. I can share this. So Joyce will be one of the presenters focusing on storytelling in January. So she'll talk a little bit more about that later. Our other presenters include Bruce Filson, and let's see if I can move to the next slide. Oh, there. Okay, Bruce, do you want to share this?
Sure. So this is just a quick description of what I want to do at the workshop. The poet works at fabricating a word composition in which the reader's feelings are discovered, rather than the patently banal, overbearing truism that the poet expresses his or her feelings, which nobody wants to hear anyway. For a writing prompt, I would ask the poet to first meditate on the most insignificant and minor passing observation that he or she made in the last 24 hours. I would then ask them to cloak it in words without describing it. Any words, especially the ones that don't seem right, anything. Then there's a third operation, the most exciting and interesting one. So I left it there for some suspense.
It sounds intriguing, doesn't it? All right. So our next one will be Veronica Trebesh, or Trebesh, I'm not sure how she pronounces it, but she writes, having led a devotional that studies the intersection of inspiration and Baha'i virtues for over a year, she will speak about how virtues can be incorporated in the fiction writing process, serve as prompts, and inspire work. She'll also explore how the Baha'i writings can help inspire your fiction. She's currently working on her first book and has had poetry and short stories published. And then there is Kathy Hogensen. Kathy Jewett Hogensen will speak about writing a biography from the research to the storytelling. This specialized form of nonfiction holds special pitfalls for the Baha'i author, which she will explore along with preparing the manuscript for the publisher. She is currently completing a biography on poet and art dealer Horace Hawley after 10 years of research. So I hope you're excited about our series and will consider signing up for at least some of them, if not all of them. Okay, I wanted to share something about the Desert Rose website, which is a new website, and you can see that there's an emphasis on the arts, on sustainable agriculture, and on spirituality. So that's very exciting. And our Write Life series is under courses and podcasts. So here's how to find it in the website. Okay, let me stop that for now. And so concerning the topic for today, telling your story, speaking your truth. This relates to so many forms of writing, from notes to diary entries to creative nonfiction, poetry, essays, fiction, and so forth. Valuing and telling our stories shaped by our lives helps us voice and write out our truths. When you think about it, each earthly life from cradle to grave is full of so many aspects, some pleasant or even astonishing or sublime, some difficult, even perhaps traumatic, some perplexing, some embarrassing, some regrettable. When you think about it, our stories reflect a unique journey that is ours. And who else can better describe or bear witness than ourselves? So 2 important ways we can leave something behind is through children and through art. And our literary progeny, even if it's ragged or unknown at the time, might well be an important record of our times, our lives, our communities. Now let's hear from Joyce, who has a special affinity with storytelling and who has performed some of her stories on stage. Joyce.
Thanks. Okay, I'm going to do a little screen share here. We're good to go?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for the next few minutes, we're going to talk very generally about storytelling and about what opportunities that you may find to discover stories and also to craft your own stories. So this conversation is going to be a very brief overview, and we're not going to be talking so much about content, what to put in your story, as we are going to talk about crafting. For more on content, you'll need to come back for one of our longer sessions. And then when we're done with this portion of today's presentation, I'm going to share a story with you. So humans have made art around storytelling from the very beginning. This is a picture of the Lecaux cave paintings in southwest France. This is the oldest art discovered, and it tells a story. It's the story of a hunt. I personally believe that storytelling is part of our human nature. Every culture has its own stories or narratives. Stories are shared in order to educate, to entertain, to preserve culture, and to inspire and instill moral values. So you, as a writer and storyteller, are part of a very venerable group. Stories come in all shapes and sizes. There are endless avenues for discovering stories and sharing your own, from big blockbuster movies to pithy YouTube videos. Companies are increasingly using storytelling to their advantage, both on their own through the product branding, and then also through the stories of their customers when they ask customers to write reviews. Airbnb, Warby Parker, Old Spice, and Apple have all used storytelling to their advantage. Good storytelling is essential to good writing. And if you want to become a better writer, work on honing your storytelling. So I want to talk a little bit about the difference between conversation versus storytelling. So, we all know people who are good conversationalists, natural born storytellers. And sometimes people say, oh, you should write a book, you should write that down. But there are differences between conversations and stories. But here's the good news. There are ways to refine and shape your stories that give them better, greater impact. And you can learn to craft and hone your own stories. You can learn how to do that. And just as a brief discussion about how to do that, I've pulled up the 5 W's of crafting a story. Who, what, when, where, and why. So I studied journalism, and beginning reporters are urged to include these 5 elements in their coverage. I'm using them today in a slightly different way. We're going to talk about these terms as ways to think about how you can refine your storytelling. So let's look at each of them. Who? Who is your audience? And you see this Zoom shot here. Our audiences are shifting. They're growing and getting bigger and wider all the time. So the number 1 rule for public speakers used to be know your audience. And I would say that today that's difficult. We don't always know who's in our audience. But along with the shift in the audience, there's a shift in your product. Essays become podcasts, books become audiobooks, and product pitches become viral videos. We can, however, still craft our stories, and I want to emphasize again that word craft, with a particular audience in mind. It would be good for you to consider who your ideal audience member is, and then write as if you were speaking to that person. Write directly to that person. The other thing is audiences now are able to find you. Increased Google searches and this increased electronic network means that your audience will come to you. Let's talk a little bit about the what of storytelling. So all stories start with an event. Something happens. Then you add emotion, characters, and sensory detail. Now, your story can be either fact or fiction, but in either case, a good story must have a core element of truth. The message of the story must ring true. So I would add to this what, I would say also, so what? You want your story to answer that question, so what? Make sure that your story has a point. When? Over the past couple of years here in Chicago, there has been an explosion of live storytelling. And I think this partly grew out of the fact that a lot of people were doing stand-up comedy, and they were looking for ways to tell deeper material, to go into their material deeper and to tell stories. Stand-up stage live on-stage storytelling has a distinct intimacy and immediacy about it. And if you would like to hear of some of these kinds of stories, I would suggest that you check out The Moth. So The Moth broadcasts stories that are recorded live on National Public Radio. So you can just Google The Moth. And then as far as listening to stories later, then, the recent technology has given individuals more and more ways to capture their stories to record for later viewing and sharing. It really is power in your phone, in the palm of your hand. Where are you telling your story? In a book, on stage, in an essay, in a poem, in an audio or video recording, in a script or screenplay, at the dinner table. And this is not an exhaustive list. Each of these scenarios requires different ingredients, different styles and tones and approaches, but they do all have some things in common. There are things that listeners look for in a story. One thing you can do to shape your story is to make sure that it has a very distinct beginning, a middle, and an end. And why tell stories? We tell stories to inform, to entertain, and to remember. The stories that we hear and tell help us make sense of our lives and experiences. Everyone has a story to tell. And today, I'm happy that I'm able to share one of my stories with you. So do I get a spotlight here? I don't see myself. There I go. Hi. So let me see here. Okay, so I do some live performance storytelling, and that is, I'm going to share a piece with you today. This particular story is written in the genre of a classic European folk tale, and it is a story for Oktoberfest. Once upon a time, in a little tiny village in Austria, south of Vienna, where my paternal grandparents come from, the people prepared to celebrate the fall harvest. This region is known the world over for fine grapes and the wine they produce. But that year, times were tough. The weather had not been good, and the harvest was meager. In efforts to keep up morale, though, the Burgermeister, the mayor, who bore an uncanny resemblance to my grandfather's grandfather, the mayor decided that the festival should go on as usual. They would have an Oompa band with music, and Tanzen, dancing. And to eat, there would be delicious savory Wiener Schnitzel and sweet Apfelstrudel. And per custom, each family was asked to contribute a bottle of wine to pour into a communal barrel that would be shared at the celebration. Now, one of the winemakers who heard of the mayor's decision whispered to his wife, "You know, I'm just a poor working farmer, and we've had a very difficult year. I don't think that we can spare even a single bottle of wine. Perhaps I can bring a bottle of water instead. That barrel is so big, if I pour water in, no one will know the difference." And that's what he did. The next day, the people gathered at the town square, and to much fanfare, the mayor initiated the festivities. He approached the big communal barrel. He held up a ceremonial cup to the spigot of the wine barrel. He twisted the tap, filled his cup, and then raised it to his lips. Water! All of the farmer's neighbors had had the same idea. Now, this mayor, who bore an uncanny resemblance to my grandfather's grandfather, this mayor was a wise man. He believed in forgiveness and second chances. He looked into the faces of the expectant crowd and proclaimed, "This is the best wine ever. In fact, it is so good that it should be shared. let's postpone the wine tasting until tomorrow and invite all of the people from the neighboring village to join us. Could each family please bring a second bottle of wine so there will be enough? He had a second barrel brought to the town square. And that night, every person in town poured a bottle of their finest wine into that second barrel. And the following day, the people of the little tiny village felt relieved and generous and lighthearted as they hosted the biggest and most joyous Oktoberfest ever. The end.
Thank you so much, Joyce. All right. Well, I hope you were excited and inspired by that story, and we look forward to Joyce's longer presentation workshop in January. So now we're going to share something about the writing prompt that we're going to do today. There, can you see it?
Great. So for today's writing prompt, it is deceptively simple looking. You can choose one of these two. I remember second grade and my best friend. Or I don't remember. I don't remember when I started collecting seashells, but now every time I go to the beach, I have to look for one. And then it opens up. So these two, I remember, I don't remember, really are just an invitation for you to share what is on your mind and what is in your heart. So relive the situation that comes to mind when you're writing about it and try to make it vivid for the reader. You add sensory details and description and write very quickly to get it down on paper or screen. So we are going to write for 10 minutes and I have a timer. I will sound a little bell when we start, and then about 9 minutes into it, I'll sound the bell again so that you'll know to wrap it up.
So again, there's 10 minutes to do this writing exercise. Seize your moments. And after that, we'll come back into the large group and then divide into smaller groups to share.